We have an exciting show for you guys. We'll be diving into politics, some social programs, and some great news this week in terms of the healthcare front, which I believe Rowan's going to really bring in a great insight into. And we're pretty excited about this news. So we have a packed show for you. We're definitely going to dive in deep. I'll go ahead and pass it off to Seth so you can say hi to everybody, and we'll pass it to Rowan after that.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back again. Today we have Rowan on. I don't think we've had him on since like the first or second episode, and I don't even think that those made it onto YouTube because of like the expiration date of them or whatever. But we're glad to have you back again. We've got a lot to talk about because you have not been as active on Twitter in a while, and I feel like you've changed a lot politically. I feel like that's a lot to discuss. People's political evolutions are interesting to me because I started off super conservative, went through a libertarian phase, and now generally like pretty left leaning. And I feel like there's a lot of explanations that lead to somebody having a big political evolution. So I feel like that's the kind of thing we can discuss because we've all pretty much changed 180 at some point, as far as I know. Maybe not. Well, let's discuss it. Welcome back, Rowan.
Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it.
We like it. We love the background too. It's amazing. Get the blue vibe going. That's always awesome.
I thought it'd be a good vibe, and yeah, I haven't been active on. Well, I guess it's called X now. The time I
No,
left it was
no,
called
we don't
Twitter.
do that. It's Twitter.
It's always gonna be Twitter, but I guess officially it's been changed to X since I've been back or before I got back. It was changed to X by Elon Musk. Um, but yeah, no, I'm happy to be back, and um, well, I'd say some of my political beliefs and observations or thoughts have changed. I mean, at the same time, there's always like moral foundations. I think that no matter where you're coming from, people stick to, because you can change economic views and change um, even social views, but I think there are always some foundational things that people stick to for the most part, which is will be fascinating to observe in this discussion. So yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, we're constantly evolving, and that's the point of the show is to get more insight, learn more things, so that our message get out as progressive. But maybe we'll learn something, redefine what that message will be. And so that's what the show's about. It's about continuous growth. Um, I'm going to start off with current events. That's always important to see where we're at. This is a political show, so we start off with some of the current events that's politically happening right now. Right now, there's not a lot happening in the Democratic front. I think um, Mariam, I always have a hard time with her last name.
Marianne Williamson,
There it is, Mariam Williamson, and
Dean
Dean
Phillips.
Phillips. Thank you. And that tells you exactly the state of their race because I don't remember the names. So, they had a debate, I believe, earlier this week on Monday, discussing what their future and their outlook for the country would be. I didn't personally see it. I just saw it was a ticker. They had a debate.
Yeah, I don't even know who covered it because I've heard basically nothing about it.
Yeah, so
There
I
is
didn't
there is
really
some
watch
like
it.
misinformation going around that they like said their whole speech was in front of a bunch of like seventh graders or something like that, and then they literally just showed the filming of it, and that's not true at all. It's just
Mm.
completely. It was like a joke or something. So I don't know. That just
There's not
just
enough
shows
coverage.
how it's really going. It's basically like no media sources actually even covering it. So
Yeah,
might as well not have happened.
I don't know exactly what their strategy is going forward, but it's not looking good, especially the poll numbers. I think last poll had Biden at 80%. It's it's
Yeah.
really bad.
Well, New
But
Hampshire, New Hampshire, Dean Phillips has like 15-20%. Marion Williamson has like, I don't know, 5-10%. But still, that's not enough to like change anything. And Biden's not even on the ballot in that state. So, like, with all their best efforts, doesn't really look like anything's going to change at the Democratic front.
no,
But I don't know. If you see on the Republican front, Nikki Haley is within like 5 points in New Hampshire, and that is
hmm
easily winnable state for her at this point. And
yeah,
that's
and
like one of the.
especially
Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your point. I was just gonna say, especially if Iowa's outcome is gonna be.
I was just saying that's gonna be one of the first states in the primary. So it's gonna. I mean, if Nikki Haley starts off winning a primary state, like in the very early times of the election, people might be like, "Well, maybe she does have a shot. Maybe I should consider this candidate," and then completely shake
Mhm.
things up. But I mean,
It'll be interesting to see. Yeah.
she consistently polls higher than Joe Biden when they're pitted against each other. So I mean, if
Yeah.
Republicans really wanted to win, they'd probably actually go for Nikki Haley.
Mhm. I think the thing too also that's very interesting is now that Chris Christie's dropped out, it's leaving that space for more of a moderate Republican candidate to succeed, and beat Trump. Um, Coming from the Democratic side of things, and coming from that goal of wanting to elect Democrats, that is a worrying prospect. Thinking about what we call it, a Nikki Haley victory, um, but it is nice to see that Republicans might be having some sort of common sense after all this MAGA right wing extremism has been taking over their party the last few or 4 years, or even longer now. But I mean, you know, so seeing Chris Christie drop out and make space for Nikki Haley will be interesting. Will be interesting and effective to see in the New Hampshire, not New Hampshire, Iowa. Um,
Well, both the states, it's pretty competitive actually. She's within like 10 points in both states. So
but okay, then I didn't know that. Okay,
I
then
don't know
it'll be
so
interesting to
much
see.
about the rest of them, but that's at least where they're investing most of their time campaigning right
I
now.
know Scott. Is he the Sununu? The
Oh,
is he
Sununu,
the
yeah, Chris Sununu.
or Chris Sununu? Sorry, yeah, Chris Sununu. I know he's a Haley supporter, so
Yeah.
that will be interesting to see
Yeah,
for
a
sure.
lot of center people are coming for her. I know right now the business community is 100% behind her. Um, I mean, JP Morgan is behind her, and many other businesses are behind her. So she is definitely coming out as a centrist candidate.
I
Well,
mean, just that's
as
just
best
in
she can.
comparison to Trump, though. She's far from a centrist. Trump is just campaigning so far right now that anything like moderately tolerable, like it wouldn't completely destroy our country as you know it, that's considered centrist.
Yeah,
I
Because
put yeah,
go ahead.
sorry.
No,
I
go ahead.
put Haley at the soft right. I think Haley like a neocon right, which in some senses, I mean, depending on who you are, is still a very negative prospect. I mean, depending on who you are in like especially foreign policy things, she's very much not a pacifist. So if you're not into peace as much, you might like her. I know that she's definitely funded by defense organization or defense contracting
Contractors.
companies, and in situations like Gaza, I don't think she'll be one who's looking to find solutions to find ceasefires and find peace. I think she'd want to. In that case, she's also supported the Israeli government's bombardment of Gaza. So I think in
Yeah,
relations to
that was one of the things that she criticized Trump for, is that
Mhm.
Trump was moderately critical of Netanyahu, and she's like, "We don't want a leader that questions Israel's
this is
intentions." Blah blah blah. Blah.
yeah,
I'm like,
That's
"Yo,
worrying. That's
that is the
worrying when you
wrong
want
take."
because if you want someone to lead the country, you got to have someone who actually wants to ask questions and challenge your allies. Because yes, allies are allies, and you're supposed to support them. I guess that's the narrative of having an ally inherently. But if you allow an ally to be just open to do anything and you not to have the ability to criticize, like what's happening with Netanyahu's government is horrendous. I don't know anyone who can say otherwise. The current Israeli government's doing really shitty things to Palestinians, and the solution they think they're doing is actually going to be a worse problem in the next coming 10 to 20 years because everything they do in Gaza is going to bite back at them in 10 to 20 years. Once those kids grow up, once they climb out the rubble and have to make lives
Mhm.
again because of these Israeli bombardments, you got to take into context. If your house was all of a sudden bombed by a different government and you had to crawl out of those rubble and see your dead friends and family members, I don't think your first thought is, "Oh, I love those people. They did a good thing." Your thought is
yeah,
probably, "Wow, they just destroyed my life. I have no love for them." And it's a sad thing because for people like me, I like the idea of peace and pacifism. And I love the end of the the end of the road to be a peaceful world where people cooperate with one another and work with one another. But Israel has decided to take and I say this to make sure that there's no claims of hypocrisy. The U.S. government has done the same thing, like in relation to the Middle East wars. Going off into Iraq and Afghanistan. A lot of people think the solution is doing, horrendous militarism, and to the extent that it harms civilians more than it does actual fighters. But in the end, that actually just harms prospects for peace even more. So I guess the worrying thing, back to Nikki Haley, the fact that she's so, focused on Israel's mission, which is it's an impossible mission inherently, and it's just an excuse for them to be able to do as much military action without much justification, because if they're saying they're trying to target Hamas, they can kill children and kill women and kill innocents and say, well, we didn't mean to kill them. They're just what do you call it? Casualties in a bigger war, or I forgot the terminology, but a cost, I guess that's something they would describe it as. But I don't think that's
the cost of war.
The cost of war. In the 21st century, we have the technology to do directed targets, right?
Mhm.
If they generally wanted, like, they had the technology to have a fucking Iron Dome. I'm sorry, not to say, but the Iron Dome, literally the idea of the Iron Dome is that
it didn't work, but yeah.
They had the technology to do an Iron Dome. I'm surprised they don't have the technology to somehow simply target Hamas without killing, because the majority of their casualties are civilians. This is reported.
It's between like 60 and 80% of the people that they've killed have been completely innocent and no ties to Hamas. And they are always like, oh, Hamas is using human targets, or using human shields, whatever. But they're still like, but we gotta get Hamas anyway, so we're still gonna shoot at them. So you're knowingly using like human lives as a cost for killing, or for a bigger cause. That doesn't sound any different than what Hamas is doing. Not that Hamas is right. They both are wrong. But like, if the cost of your cause is more innocent people dying than guilty people, then it's not a very good cause.
No.
Yeah.
But that's always kind of been the issue with Israel, is that they've always done this. Like, they've always used a war to get in, and then find some way or somehow to justify mass casualty. And obviously I know we're supporters of Israel, but for me, it's always been a negative drawback about their military action. It's always been, it's never an equal, and war is never equal. I'm not gonna lie. I've been to Iraq, so war is never equal. But when you can't justify killing 80-90% of civilians, because I went to Iraq, and I've studied military history, and that casualty disparity, that civilian military ratio and casualty is the very huge disparity.
Yeah,
80-90% of
in
civilians
comparison to
dying.
this current conflict.
Yeah, it doesn't really justify the means of you were attacked through an organization. It wasn't attacked by the Palestinian people. And to use that to kind of shift the narrative, because I think what I suspect is happening is they're going to use this to justify taking more territory from the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
And
to monitor Hamas or something like that.
To monitor Hamas.
And what I mean? It's just going to turn into a permanent occupation.
Yeah. So criticism of Israel in that aspect is fair. And that's what Republicans, that's what they go wrong with this whole issue, is saying that, well, you can't criticize Israel because Israel has no faults. Every country has faults. Even America has faults.
It's if you don't support Zionism or support every action of Israel, then you're anti-Semitic and you just don't like that they're Jewish or something like that. Which that's a straw man argument. You know what I mean? It avoids them from like addressing the actual problem and excusing. America is a great country and America does bad things. Just because you love America doesn't mean you're not allowed to criticize it and criticize the things that they're doing wrong, because you'd like them to do well and you'd like them to, create more harmony in the world instead of creating or perpetuating more terrorism in the long haul.
Yeah. And the truth of it too, as well, is that, again, going back to what I said earlier, like, if the long-term goal, because a lot of Israeli officials have said this, is to create a more a two-state solution. So, I mean, a lot of other Israeli officials have said otherwise. They want a one-state
Yeah.
solution, but
Yeah.
a lot of Israeli officials have seemed to also say in the government that they want a two-state solution. And their goal is to somehow, reform Gaza in some way. And in the bothering part,
Save the Palestinians by getting rid of Hamas, which it
saving.
sounds
They
great,
try to,
but
yeah.
you gotta do it in practice.
They make themselves heroes when in reality, I mean, I don't know. Okay, one thing that hopefully most people in life they gain is critical thinking, and I always just try to explain it like this to anyone, and also I think that to go back to anti-Semitism thing, I think criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitic. There's a lot of Jewish people who also, and Israelis who even criticize the government
Yeah.
within Israel. So criticizing the actions of a right-wing government, which Netanyahu government is a right-wing government, is not inherently anti-Semitic, and the issue is mainly that a lot of conversations get shut down due to that
Mhm.
usage of that claim, and it's kind of worrying that I mean I guess that's an issue that arises once you criticize a state that inherently has a religious tie to a certain religion, and that's just the nature of it. But I think the truth is most critical thinking people will realize, one, you're allowed to criticize a nation even if it has a religious tie, and two, that destruction and ethnic cleansing. I'm going to use that terminology because I feel comfortable using that terminology because I don't know what else to describe it as. If you're
Yeah.
bombing and flattening a whole city and telling people to leave, you're
When
trying to
there's
get
nowhere
them out
to
of the area
go,
and
be
leave
like,
that
oh,
area.
you need to escape because we're gonna carpet bomb this place. Escape
Yeah.
where? If there's not really for anywhere for them to escape, just like saying they need to leave with nowhere to go is not
And then,
actually
then they say they
cover.
want them to leave to go to certain areas and they bomb those areas.
Yeah.
So there's no actual place of safety for Palestinians. And that's a worrying thought. And I mean, there's some good news, and I'm going to say some good news with a very, very, very small stipulation that it might not be. But South Africa, I know, is now introduced in the International Courts of Justice, I believe, or International Courts in the UN, charges against Israel for war crimes, which I think is some good news because I think there needs to be accountability, whether it be the Israeli
Or at
government,
least
which
recognition.
recognition. My only worry is that it likely won't be found to
It
be.
won't catch on, yeah.
It won't be found. They won't be found guilty. I really doubt that. But I think that South Africa, having experienced apartheid, probably knows what apartheid is
Yeah.
best. And I think that's the irony in it. They're the ones who are pushing forward the war crimes and apartheid charges towards Israel, and they honestly should because they're the ones who've had experiences with it historically, and they probably know best due to that. But yeah, it's a really worrying situation there, and I think that there are facts that Republicans, and or at least some Republicans, are saying, "I'll just have faith in them." It would be the same as our allies saying, "Have faith in America," and I wouldn't want them to say that because America does fuck up hugely sometimes.
Yeah.
It has in the past, and it's
Mhm.
it's a blind argument to say just trust this state because it's a good state. The leadership changes depending on where you're at, every 4 years, every 2 years, or however elections go. But the leaders change. The state doesn't. So but the leaders lead the state. So
Yeah, the leaders are the representative of that state. So whoever the leader is, then guess what? He has the personality and the demeanor of that state. That's how he gets elected, normally,
yeah,
right? So
Yeah,
your leaders
I
are.
think things like loyalty to your state or to your allies. It's like it's some sort of ideal that I don't think is all that good in practice because all that really means is like you're going to hold them to a different standard as you would any other country. You know what I mean? It's like you're greenlighting all their failures because you're friends with them. Like that's not good for politicians or for countries. Think about
yeah,
Trump supporters being loyal to Trump. That means they're just willing to trust him or put aside a critical lens of his words and
Mhm.
actions because of, inherent trust in him. Which means more like I'm willing to have my opinion shaped by his act, like whatever he says, which doesn't seem like a healthy way to make decisions or have opinions. So I don't know. The U.S. needs to maybe not inherently jump to the side of we need to fund whatever our allies engaged with. It's not like Israel is a weak military or is that any sort of loss when they're fighting with just such a disorganized group of people. So I don't know. I think we need to have a lot more conversation about where we send our money. Foreign aid is a good thing, but when you're supporting bad projects, the problem is like both parties are so complicit in
Yeah.
supporting Israel no matter what because of the ally thing. And
Hmm.
like I just don't trust Democrats to be good on this issue, which is a problem because as liberals they're supposed to stand on the side of liberty and self-determination, personal freedom, and all that stuff is obviously tainted by war right now.
Yeah.
There's, they claim
It's hard.
Israel is such a safe haven in the Middle East, but like it's like illegal to have not interracial, interfaith marriages. It's like
Hmm.
a Jewish person it's illegal for them to date a Christian or to marry a Christian. Like they're
Yeah.
not like this liberal democracy ever. It's a right wing country, just like every other country in the Middle East. So
Yeah, the issue is there as well as they do this thing called rainbow washing, and I mean they did it on Twitter with some posts as well. The IDF, they said this is the first time a rainbow flag was. I think an IDF soldier took a picture of the rainbow flag and said this is the first time a rainbow flag has ever been waved in Gaza. And I can almost assure you that most people in the LGBTQ plus community don't want to be used as a tool for uh, ethnic cleansing. You know, to
yeah,
justify
and
ethnic
it's
cleansing.
not like same sex marriage is even legal in Israel. It's not.
Yeah,
They don't.
it's and,
It's not criminalized. Or like people aren't criminalized for being gay, but it's not a progressive country at all. It's
but
not a country that we
yeah.
need to unanimously support their actions, just like any other country. There's not a country on earth that we need to unanimously support their actions. You need to judge every single country by their actions uniquely, just
And
like the United States.
and it gets worrying though when they use those I guess virtue signaling honestly for using the like different quote unquote like liberal or progressive causes because that's what makes it easier for Democrats and liberal minded people to justify Israel because I mean that's the only thing with this issue that's very I mean not maybe there's other similar issues but it's very unique is that I mean I'd consider myself on the left as well but I also know people who I consider on the left but who are in the position that Israel's doing the right thing. Mind you, we still see eye to eye. In the end of the day, we agree on domestic issues, but it's just still a worrying thing for me. The fact that even within the left, which we consider this about to be the center of unity with liberals and socialists or social democrats, all of those folks bunched up with a common goal for progressive causes, you know, an issue like Israel, which is a human rights issue when you go down to the core of it, is such a divided issue. Because I mean, the
Yeah,
simplicity of it is you know, I mean,
it's
people
it's
deserve
such
to
a
live free
it's
and
such an
happy.
issue that's people have so much emotional invoked with, like
Yeah,
no matter on either side, and nobody's willing to admit like both sides have their problems, so maybe we shouldn't like unanimously support one side as the good or bad. I think black and white thinking is the easiest way to approach any issue, but that doesn't
and
make it accurate.
America, yeah, and America's been the biggest defender of what's going on in Gaza and Israel's actions, and that's the thing too. Is like again, like you're saying, neutrality might be even the best move in an issue like this. You know, not supporting, of course, obviously not supporting Hamas. What Hamas did was horrendous, but not supporting what the IDF is currently doing either is that will be the best position to play. Because I mean, the truth of it is, you know, and maybe this will sound harsh. What the IDF is doing now, if we're talking about destruction and losses of life, is the same, if not more destructive than Hamas. Not to say what Hamas did was justified. Hamas again is horrendous, but both of them have done violent actions that have changed people's lives and taken people's lives.
Israel
And
has a higher rate of casualties than Hamas does right now. They're both very high. They're both willing to sacrifice innocent lives for the overall cause, which makes the cause not worth it in the big grand scheme of things. But overall, Israel has been more ruthless in who they decide to attack,
yeah,
and it's
I mean,
it has to do with a higher grade of weapons which we are providing to them. You know what I mean? We're just
and
so willing to use whatever resources are necessary to wipe out competition, which just means anybody standing in the way of Hamas, which are
and that's
innocent people.
yeah. And the worrying thing too, though, is also like I mean, if you told people and showed them the because this is our tax dollars when you think about it. At the end of the day, if you showed people what their tax dollars are doing to people's lives, I think that it would be, you know, it would change the way people view on it. I think the thing is with like the news channels, the main news channels. First of all, they want to show graphic content, which
Yeah.
understandable. That's a probably legal thing or a company based thing. But in some sort of sense, I think that it's important for people to know that, hey, you're a citizen paying your taxes. Instead of healthcare, instead of education, instead of this, that, or this is what your money's going towards to. And it's going towards bombing homes, taking people, like killing people. You know, again,
Completely
not to justify
leveling
what Hamas did.
cities off the map,
Yeah,
wiping cities off the map.
and this is not Hamas that is getting mainly targeted. Maybe you'll get one Hamas people after every 1,000, but in my opinion, if it takes 1,000 deaths to get one Hamas person, it's not worth it.
Yeah, Hamas is not
At
even
that point,
located
it's not.
in Palestinian territory.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is also there's this great video I saw. I think it was on Instagram. It was from a BBC commentator and LBC, like one of the British channels. But the guy said if Israel knew that the Hamas was based in, like, let's say, uh, Tel Aviv, right? Let's say they were posted in Tel Aviv, like
Yeah.
in some sort of tunnels. Do you think they'd have the same sort of action? Would they bomb the fuck out of Tel Aviv?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
wouldn't,
They're
because
Israeli
they
citizens.
see the Palestinians as less than. I mean, the thing that's the only moral aspect you can only
Exactly.
consider, because it's not Israeli territory and they don't have a quote unquote responsibility to it. They feel more justified in completely flattening it to reach the end of their goals because there's no cost to them. There's no cost. But if it was Tel Aviv, I bet you then they would start doing more specific and targeted operations with probably personnel
Special
rather than saying,
operations teams instead of
yeah,
dropping
and it's because
bombs.
it speaks a lot to what their priorities are, and their priorities are not to help the Palestinian people. Sadly, that's just the truth of it. Their goal is to quote unquote destroy Hamas, which also means destroying Gaza in the process. We've seen that now. The sad thing is now that this has happened already. There's nothing we can't go back in time and stop the bombings. We can't stop the lives that have been lost. We can't stop the people who have been displaced.
Yeah.
Now we can only thing we can do is tell our public officials to support a ceasefire, right? And that's the simplest thing you could do. Like, not to tell people what to do, but I mean, I've done it. I talked to my congressman. I've emailed him and I've called his office and I've told him that if he truly stands for human rights, he'd stand for a ceasefire. And I think that's not a position because people I know there's Zionists, anti-Zionists, and all the political theory behind Israel and Palestine behind it. Like I don't really know enough to touch that. I've talked to people who have both views, anti-Zionist and Zionist. I'm not going to sit here and say Israel does not deserve to exist, or vice versa. I think two-state solution might be a good thing if it could actually be carried out in a manner that brings justice to both sides.
Yeah.
But in the end of the day, what the current issue right now is bombs are being dropped and guns are being fired, and nothing, in my opinion, could be solved until that's stopped. Nothing. There'll be no diplomacy. There'll be no peace. There'll be no resolution until there's a ceasefire, until the weapons stop, because there's no solution if they're dead. There's no solution if, I mean, in the end of it, like, is the goal to find a better outcome for Israel and Palestine, to find peace, or is it to kill out all the people who live in Gaza to make it easier for Israelis to live in these areas? I mean, not to blame the Israelis, because mind you, I have as much sympathy for Israeli civilians as I do Palestinian civilians. I think
Yeah.
that, well, unless they voted for Bibi, then if they voted for Bibi, I think they're fucking assholes. But
Yeah, I mean, then they're at least somewhat complicit, but
they're
no,
somewhat complicit. But there's a
still.
lot of Israelis who've been protesting Netanyahu, have been, because he also tried to do judicial reforms, those failed in Israel, and
Yeah,
you know,
which is crazy.
yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah,
no, you're right. Like I said, I feel like sometimes Israel's issues get tied with Netanyahu a lot. His stances are not usually Israeli stances. He has this I would say this gravitas or political or lack of political will on the Israeli front to take him on because he's kind of that figure
He's sort
for
of the de
Israeli
facto
protection.
leader of the country. He represents a large base of. They're not even like their opposition is a centrist party. Like they don't.
yeah.
Mm.
There's no left wing in the country. So being right leaning is kind of a status quo in Israel, and I
I
don't think
mean,
that that's
yeah.
good in any country.
Well, in the
Saudi
modern
Arabia,
sense,
Iran.
yeah, in the modern sense, Israel's that way. The fascinating thing, and I'm going to speak as a history major now because I am a little bit of a history major, is the fascinating thing to look at in the past of Israel is that they did have left wing leadership. They had labor Zionism, which will remind you, if some people believe Zionism is inherently right wing, maybe they'd disagree with that idea. But there was a left wing governments in the past that were more worker focused and less cultural Well, mind you, I think the idea of Zionism to some is already inherently a colonialist thing, so I know that it will be contested with. But
Yeah.
talk about like the right wing aspect of it, in the modern sense. I think the current Israeli government is much more right wing than it possibly even was in the past, in the sense that like the goal of it now is to expand the borders for some of the people in his administration. I think his minister of national security, I believe, is
Hmm.
one of the ultra right wing party, and he proposed like making Gaza an extension of Israel. I think by making them leave, and also the West. I think now the West Bank's a target as well, because people forget this sometimes. There's two Palestinian areas that are
Yeah.
well known. There's Gaza, which is a bit southwest. And there's West Bank, which is the east, about north or Middle East. Middle East. But West Bank has also been negatively affected due to the Gaza, what's happening in Gaza,
The
right?
Gaza Strip.
Now,
Yeah.
now people have been more negatively affected even in West Bank. They've become like the Israeli government has been more hard clamped on people in the West Bank. I mean, the truth of it is, there's not going to be peace and justice until there's an end to the occupation, and that's just a fact. I mean, if you have one government that has someone's boot on their neck, this is a metaphor, not literally. If you have someone who controls how you live your life, how you talk, how you express your opinions, like we talk about like American values, we believe in the freedom of speech, we believe in liberty, we believe in that. Imagine if we had, let's say, the British, right? Historically, we had the British come here. That's why we fought a whole revolution in 1776. They
Yeah.
started taxing
If we
us.
were
They said we didn't have
consistent
free
with our
speech.
values, it's
I
very
mean,
clear the United States has a lot more parallels with the Palestinian cause.
yeah,
Not talking about Hamas, the Palestinian cause of being controlled by a country from the outside. It's pretty
and
clear that there's a different power structure between you know I don't know. It's like it's a lot easier to justify people joining Hamas when they have in their mind a violent oppositional force that's been
yeah,
controlling them for their entire lives, which is why it's a concern that this is just going to be an endless cycle of retribution because we're creating more future terrorist organizations
yeah,
in Palestine. Like, how are you supposed to wipe off Hamas when you're basically recruiting Hamas by
yeah.
by creating such an evil foe in their minds?
I mean, that's the only worrying thing about that as well is like this is going to perpetuate the issue that's happening now. I mean, Israelis talk about peace in the long run. They say once Hamas is gone, there will be peace. But the thing is, we as Americans have learned this in our affairs in the Middle East.
And in like
You can kill
Vietnam,
people. You can kill people, but you can't kill ideas. And if you piss people
yeah,
off enough, the idea will last longer. Because
yeah,
people remember blood, people remember dead people remember those experiences. People are very, very emotional. We're emotional creatures. We observe emotions in a very hyper sense, which is an important thing. But so killing people inherently. I mean, again, maybe I'm sounding like a hippie, but killing people will not. It will make worse outcomes in the long run because people remember that, and people will react, and people will respond, and that's what's going to happen in Palestine. I mean, they're creating a new generation of Palestinian resistance fighters.
I mean,
Palestinian resistance
half
fighters.
of the population of Palestine is under the age of 25. So at
Yeah,
some point, their entire population is going to have gone through mass catastrophic casualty and they'll all have known somebody, a friend or family member that's been killed at the hands of this conflict. And it's going to be hard to not be emotionally charged against Israel and to draw broader conclusions about the populace as a whole. And it's going to be an ongoing conflict forever. And if we commit to funding Israel on behalf of this war now, how long is it going to keep on going? How long are we going to keep funding another war that doesn't
yeah,
really benefit us? In fact, it puts the United States more at risk of terror if we're consistent with the values of the war on terror, because we're creating a target for ourselves by funding Israel, who's going to be, like I said, perpetuating more resistance groups, more terrorist groups who have the United States and the Western coalition as an enemy.
yeah,
So we're just getting ourselves further tied up into the Middle East when it seemed like Joe Biden was on the right track pulling us out of another failed war in Afghanistan. We didn't get
yeah.
we didn't get what we wanted to get, we just kept creating more insurgents after we killed the last ones. So, I mean, it's not directly America's fault, but like we literally did nothing to benefit ourselves or the
Yeah.
people of the nation that we intervened in. In fact, more people probably died as a result. Like
So
Yeah.
whenever
this is my
necessary.
question to kind of put a bow on the topic. So it looks like you guys kind of like I think all Democrats are saying, like, yeah, we support Israel, but let's do it with more
Restraint.
well, more restraint and more, I guess, look at the issue in both in I guess in both sides.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's,
I agree with that.
you know, but do you think overall and this question you guys can both answer. Do you think overall that our policy towards, and this is most of military policy, our policy towards getting bigger and providing more force around the world is keeping us safe? Or do you think that we need to reduce our budget, bring some of our military home, allow countries to take care of themselves, um, and start focusing more on domestic policies?
I think we definitely have to focus more on domestic policies if we want to compete, but
Yeah.
also in the big picture, like us being a large, powerful nation is what's protecting us, but it's also what is pushing other nations to want to compete with our size and our power and influence on the rest of the world. Us being the United States or the world police, where sort of we get to decide what happens around the world, pushes nations like China to want to also influence policies in directions completely adverse to what we're shooting for.
Yeah.
So we're creating like a rubber band effect with, which is like as hard as we push all the countries, the rest of the world in one direction, the
Hmm.
oppositional force is also going to try to push back just as far in the other direction. So it's like, is us pushing at all just creating more endless waste and more roadblocks to our actual end goals in general? I think it seems likely that like this sort of cold war between two economic blocks
Yeah.
is really harming both sides. And we'd be a lot better if we focus more on diplomatic approaches, like ones that are not going to definitely benefit all of our values. And like maybe working with China sounds bad because they're an evil country, but maybe that's the only way for us to be able to influence them and their population. You know what I mean? Because if
Well,
we're creating such an opposition to the West, then Western ideas are never going to be accepted by countries that don't have a liberal democracy.
no, I
I,
agree with you. Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
I agree. I think there's a balance here, though. There's two aspects to it. One, our military budget, I think, is the biggest in the world.
Yeah,
If I'm not
and
mistaken, if
and
not
how much
or
of it
the
is
biggest.
unaccounted for by the audits that they do like every year? Like that's
Yeah.
a massive amounts that are just completely unaccounted for.
Well, that's
So
an issue too. If we talk,
yeah,
that's what's funny. Conservatives talk about fiscal responsibility and transparency, and then you have issues like that, and they don't bat an eye or talk about it. But I think there's a balance here because I do see there's two aspects to it. One, pieces in diplomacy are always a priority and or should be a priority. I mean, they should be a priority in an ideal world. But
Yeah.
I think depending on what countries you talk to, like, because I have no idea what it's like to live in certain countries that have American bases nearby. But I know some people who are like, oh yeah, let's say Taiwan, for example. If America didn't have a presence in any sort of base in Asia, I bet you Taiwan would feel a lot more fearful of a Chinese invasion, right? Or
Taiwan probably wouldn't still exist anymore. It would just be already another province of China. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like
and that's what's
if nobody
that's
was
the
standing
important
in the
part.
way of China, you know, if nobody stood in the way or was powerful enough to stop China, then nobody would. China
Yeah,
would just do whatever they could possibly demand, which is why support for Ukraine is so important because Russia is an occupying force and they have
yes,
imperialist ambitions and they're not going to stop whenever the current conflict is over, especially if they get good results. They're just going to continue
yeah,
on. So we need to stand up as the liberal internationalist union of the world and be like, individual freedom and self-determination is a priority.
it is.
And
That's what's important about it. That's where I mean, I would consider myself on a personal level at the very least a pacifist. I think that peace and discussion is should be a priority because killing is inherently a negative thing morally in my eyes. I think there's
Yeah.
ways to justify it in cases of self-defense and
Yeah.
cases, of course, there's always ways to justify it. But I think at the end of the day, it will hurt your morality in an internal sense. Like if you kill someone, there's studies on this. Mentally, it messes you up. It just it's a science now, right?
Yeah.
And so the goal, if that's a well-known fact, like if there's like, thinking about it scientifically, if it's known that that causes that, then the goal should be to prevent that from happening in any way necessary. And that's why peace is such a priority for a lot of people, because they want people to be able to live lives where they're not affected negatively mentally, and where they can be able to succeed and prosper without the fear of being harmed physically and or losing their lives.
And I
You
think
know,
that explains like the baby boomer generations. I think it creates a more conservative minded people when they go through so much struggle and so much fear and suffering and loss early on in
yeah,
their lives. It kind of creates a vibe of people, and one that's like more at risk adverse because they've seen what can happen when things go south. And I think that keeps a population from moving forward sometimes just out of fear. And fear never solves anything. Like it's better to think forward and think ambitiously, but also think practically. I feel like that's kind of like our motto here. It's like,
yeah,
you know, it's
Like,
it's a lot better to like dream and follow through on your dreams than just sort of let the world control you.
yeah,
And I don't know. I think having a population of people of peace would create people, a lot kinder people, a lot of people that are more willing to work together as nations, and things that we can grow together. Are, the amount of money we spend on war is waste. The amount of suffering and individual talent that's wasted in wars and death and casualties is waste. That's stuff that we could use towards creating innovation. We could create more people getting along and more economic ties, trade deals, economic growth for poorer countries that are kind of out of the picture right now. Like we can grow as a world together, interdependently. But instead, we're creating nationalism. We're creating borders and separation between each other, and it doesn't really help anybody to be isolated like that. An interdependent world, like everybody relying on each other, relying on each other's strengths and weaknesses, kind of creates like the best of all worlds. And I don't know, the right wing ambition is just sort of like protect our people and let everything else around us burn. If that's what happens, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect our people, which it's just stamping our progress.
I think you're right. I mean, I think you hit it on the head. So, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's just we separate because we have this inherent thing to want to feel safe, and the more and more we are isolated, the more safe we have less. I believe we feel, and the
Yeah,
more we're open and exposed to other, factors and other, I would just say, like other things that are outside of our control, like for example, China, Russia, or any other country, we have a fear that of being taken over, and it's to justify a fear for a lot of baby boomers because they grew up in a society where that was actually a possibility, with Russia and different, fascism and many things
yeah.
that they had to kind of dealt
Global
with.
authoritarian governments that they had to protect
Yeah,
themselves
their
from.
generation had to deal with. Our generation is not so much dealing with those issues anymore, and I think that goes back to, I guess my premise was, does it make sense to expand the military to grow in this amount of time, or does it make sense to invest in domestic policy
Yeah,
to go into what Seth's saying, which is increase our human capacity or human intelligence, because that's going to drive the next war, which I believe is to be on the cyber front, not necessarily on the military battlefield. So
yeah. The next world is going to be a world of competition of intelligence of what we can produce that's going to advance us faster. That's why you see
mhm,
stuff like in China. They at least since they don't spend four times as much as they already do on the military. They have a little bit of
mhm,
extra money they can spend on stuff like public infrastructure and public transportation. And you can see the kind of innovation that takes place when more money is diverted towards domestic policy. Even if there's so much horrible stuff that's also produced by China, you can see
yeah,
other giant countries taking different priorities that kind of better benefits their people. I mean, China's grown as an economy, like from an individual GDP per capita level, like substantially in the last 4 decades or so. They've completely gone from an agrarian society to like a fully
Capitalist.
basically they're a state capitalist country.
They are.
It's corporatist.
They're good,
It's
they're good at being capitalists. You gotta give them that. For being communists, they're pretty good capitalists.
Yeah, right.
I mean, yeah, if you can say anything, if you can say nothing else about them, they're the best communists at capitalism I've ever seen in my life.
mega
Except
communism.
Vietnam's getting close to that too. Vietnam's getting really close to being a good communist capitalist as well.
At least
because
they
I
still
mean,
have at least they still have social ownership of the means of production. China has completely privatized means of production. It's just state directed.
yeah,
So it's just like a
it's really
hyper regulated, completely top down version of capitalism, which is
Yeah,
basically
so
what Trump and the Republicans want in general. Like that's
yeah,
the
I mean,
irony is
you start calling them communists.
China's the biggest enemy of the Trump people, but the Chinese economic model is almost identical to Trumpism to an extent.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
Trump doesn't want a free market. He wants like state capitalism where Trump is in charge and directs everything and makes all the decisions.
he wants
That's
mercantilism. That's what he
yeah,
said.
exactly. That's
Which is a
the
fucking
ultra
scary
conservatism.
thought. If you know about history, it's a scary
Yeah.
thought of mercantilism coming back to the forefront because it's basically just, in other words, if you want to describe it, it's extractive economy model. It's a
well,
belief.
Rowan, describe it. Describe it one more time again. What's that term you used?
Mercantilism.
So yeah, mercantilism.
Explain that a little bit for everyone.
I mean, actually now I'm doubting myself, but from what I remember is like it's a colonial model that's extractive. So it's about bringing every resource back to the mainland. So now it's a form of protectionism. But
Yeah,
let me
it's
look.
like hyper
Now I'm wondering if it's
isolationism.
who's government use their economic to augment state power. Oh yeah, so yeah, okay, I am right. Mercantilism is an economic model practiced by which governments use their economies to augment state power at the expense of other countries. So the goal of it in the end is to make the most benefit for America. So if he's saying he wants American mercantilism, it's a protectionist model that will make sure that
Yeah, it's
everyone in America
economic
benefits.
nationalism, economic self-determination is kind of like the North Korean model where they don't trade with any other country and everything is produced. It's basically anti-economic theory. Like most economists agree in the concept of comparative advantage. You know what I mean? The world where Brazil produces this sort of agriculture because they have agriculture at their place, and the United States produces technology because that's where technology is best produced. If everybody's maximizing their comparative advantage, then everybody in the world is the most efficient and can get resources from across the world and divert their economic priorities more efficiently and effectively. And instead of that, they want to just like create an economy of more stratified hierarchies where
protection, hyper protectionism, because the idea of mercantilism as well is not just making so other countries get harmed and that you benefit. It's the idea that I mean you're right. It's reducing imports, it's wanting self-sufficiency on a hyper level, while expecting other countries just to buy what you have, right?
Yeah.
And
it's unrealistic.
it's
like
unreal.
it's like
I
you
mean,
guys buy
market's
from
a
us,
beautiful
but we're not
thing.
going to buy from you.
Yeah, but the thing is, the market's a beautiful thing, and that's why, I mean, in my personal opinion, I like the idea of free trade in a general sense, because I think that once you let the states or governments determine what should or shouldn't be traded and what we need to make ours and what we need to make theirs, and the truth is, people in a said country, if they can make a product for a price that is competitive, they should be able to benefit. People in Vietnam can make, let's say, remotes. Let's say they can make remotes for a cheaper price than we can here, or they can in Canada, or they can in Mexico, or they can in
they can reduce
India.
overall labor costs so they can produce cheaper items. When in like the United States,
it'd be more fucking expensive.
if we had to have all of American paid factory workers, then products would be that much more expensive. So overall, it's better for the U.S. economy to participate in comparative advantage, where maybe we do lose factory jobs to all these other countries, and maybe that's a good thing because maybe that's an improvement for those other countries gaining the factory jobs, as well as an improvement for us to have cheaper goods. So overall, it's a utilitarian advantage, which I feel like should be the fundamental of the democratic policy agenda: is maximizing the most amount of good possible.
Yeah.
Utilitarianism.
I mean, my only worry, and I say this as someone who votes Democrat for the most part, and someone who's
Yeah,
active in college Democrats,
Mhm.
um, I love. Well, I don't know. I like Biden a lot because I think he's done a lot of good things, and I honestly think he's probably been the best president we've had in history, at least the most progressive in the sense that economically and union wise, he's been standing with workers.
Yeah.
But at the same time, due to the what is it, Made in America program, I do have some concerns about that in relation to that. While I think we should support things made in America, and if you want to, it should be a
yeah,
voluntary market choice. That let's say you don't mind spending more on certain things, then you should totally be able to buy things that are made in America. But at the same time, that rhetoric is shared by Donald Trump. Made in America, make it in America, this that because that's what's happening right now. I guess is I mean, I blame it on neoliberalism a little bit because I mean
yeah,
there is that aspect where there's people who just there's union towns who absolutely hate the NAFTA, and respectfully so, like they felt the worst effects of it. Though in a personal sense, I think that no matter if NAFTA came about or not, they were going to feel that brunt of the
yeah.
economic shift inherently, no matter what, no matter how
It's
long
just
it
the
took. Those factories
economic
were going to close.
progress in general.
Those factories were going to close no matter what,
Yeah,
no matter if they're NAFTA or not, because labor in Mexico is cheaper.
yeah,
That's just the truth of it, right? And that's something that people in life have to accept. And the thing is, it's the job of the private sector to create new opportunities for people who are displaced. Because, at least in my opinion, they have to adjust for that lack of opportunity. And I think that's something that's not been as practiced upon. Like once those factories close, they don't really say, okay, now you can. There's these options. They just say, yeah, we're gone. You figure it out. And I mean, I think then you go to the discussion of maybe I don't know if you've already talked about this recently. You maybe have, and I hope not. The basic income. I remember
oh,
we had a
every
huge
episode.
every
Yeah.
episode. Well,
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
if you just put your finger to the wind of the direction that the country is going, and the necessity of a basic income to supplement, the loss of jobs in general, and because
or even
otherwise
a
we're gonna have
negative
mass
income tax.
poverty. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, even a negative income tax I've heard
Yeah,
of, and that's something that would be beneficial. The truth of it is, there's no longer room for there to be a society that's quote unquote pick yourself up by your bootstraps. The thing I hate about that terminology too is because so many conservatives use it and Republicans and quote unquote free market capitalists use it, and I believe in free markets. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying
Mhm.
to say about that. But the truth is that terminology was made as a joke inherently because you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's physically impossible. That's why people used to say that term because it's to make fun of you. It's like, oh, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You can't. You have to
yeah,
lift up your foot. You couldn't just pick yourself up by the bootstraps. And so that ideology within itself is inherently, in my opinion, toxic. I think people should make something out of themselves. If you have a skill that you can
yeah,
sell it. If you have an idea that you think is going to be marketable and you think it will help people's lives and benefit them enough that they'd actually want to invest in it, do that. We live in a society where venture and entrepreneurship should be encouraged. But at the same time, to
yeah,
pretend that everyone's going to have that opportunity or have that chance in life where they're going to have that one great idea, that one great opportunity that will ship them up to the echelons of capitalist success. It's just not true. And I think there needs. I mean, I think there's a way for capitalism to be successful for everyone.
yeah.
And I mean, some people will call that socialism, I guess, but I
Yeah.
don't know what else to call. I sometimes think social capitalism might be a better terminology, but I don't care about the
Well, there's a
theoretics of
wide
it.
ranging of similar concepts, but I think a complete hands-off approach is going to allow more for more failures that are completely unnecessary. Than we could have a
There
lot
needs,
more
yeah,
competitive economy, a lot more people successful that could create for themselves and could create something that doesn't already exist. If we have more people that are innovators instead of a hyper concentrated group of people that just have a lot of money. I mean, the only reason that the people that invent things and invest in things do is because they have the money to do so. It's not
yeah,
that they have the best ideas. There's tons of people that are way more qualified to create new ideas and new ways of
yeah.
doing things that just don't have access to that because money is power. So if we
Money is
invest
power.
more money in and people that don't have any sort of power.
Yeah,
We have a more horizontal society, a society of people of equals. You know,
yeah. And
then we could
nonprofits
have
have been,
a lot more competition, a lot more efficiency rising to the top.
yeah, and also just like to speak on that still, like nonprofits, for example, have been picking up that brunt of the weight of creating opportunities for those who don't have the financial means but have the ideas and skills to succeed in the market. Right? That's what nonprofits have. A lot of nonprofits have done. But the truth is, no matter how many nonprofits are created, we I think there needs to be a foundational system in this country, whether it be a basic income, and I also think universal healthcare would be a good thing too to release stress. But
I even
uh,
think nonprofits as like a mechanism of employment is not a bad idea. If you look at the Swiss economy, most
yeah,
of their corporations are nonprofit, and
mhm,
there's a lot more cost or a lot more profit sharing.
yeah,
It's like one of the most effective economies in the planet. So economies that are more efficient than U.S. Like we're powerful and we're large and we're
mhm,
rich, like historical. We're old money, but it's also we generally rank like top 20. Like there's tons of models that are clearly proven to be more efficient and more effective than ours. And our main problem is nothing passed at Congress. We're a country that doesn't change, and that kind of keeps us from moving forward and improving. It
yeah.
keeps bad things from happening, but it doesn't allow us to like move forward in any sort of way.
And I mean, that's where I think when you want to find progressive change, I mean, there's you should obviously participate in politics and participate in the government, but I've also come to see that even in the private sector, people can make changes. You know, you can create effective businesses that have sustainable and healthy models. You can create
Yeah,
a workers co-op. You can even create, if you can't do worker co-op, if that's too much, an employee-owned business. There's so many
yeah.
businesses
Employee
that are
stock
like that.
own programs.
Yeah,
Like there's
and creating
companies,
these fair.
right, like Jesse. Publix is an ESOP. So like if you work at Publix for a
Mm-hmm.
certain amount of time, you're able to participate in their profit and stock
Profit
owning
sharing, yeah.
programs. Yeah, and I think that that's a model that the U.S. can maintain capitalism still. They can maintain private ownership, but we can expand ownership and like business decisions to people that are affected by those decisions.
Yeah.
And
I,
No,
I
honestly,
go
that's the
ahead.
way.
I definitely think that is the future. I mean, but it's going to take, right now, it's being led by businesses. Businesses are the ones that are kind of driving these innovative programs.
Yeah,
But it's not, it's by the time we had the political capital in the middle, in the political will to make this a nationalized program. Because the idea that people think that these programs are socialist ideas is it's kind of farce because there's really no 100% pure capitalist society. There's no 100% pure socialist society.
yeah,
We have a hybrid depending on the population. And I
exactly.
believe that our population, we're in the state where it's like, okay, we are a very capitalist society, but we also have understand with capitalism comes technology. With technology comes loss of jobs. And with the loss of jobs, now how do we replace those jobs? Because now we
Yeah,
have so many amount of people, but technology has decreased the need for those people. And so, what do we
Yeah,
have as a stopgap? Because
because
you can't. Yeah, go
the,
ahead,
the,
sir.
the reasoning behind capitalism is that there's a hyper concentration of wealth amongst a few amount of people. And
mhm,
instead of stealing the money directly from them, the idea is let's create business opportunities, like ways we can work for the rich so that we can use them to, spread their money throughout society. And as there's fewer and fewer necessary jobs, as scarcity becomes less of an issue, there's going to be
Yeah,
less things for rich people to invest in, less things for their money to be used for, that they just keep it in savings, and it just completely is useless in the economy. We want more US capital to be circulating throughout the entire economy. If it's in
yeah,
the hands of more spenders and more consumers, then that goes into every single thing that they purchase day to day, small businesses. If it's in the hand of if $1 billion is in the hand of one person, what are they going to invest in? Like just stock ownership? No, they're not investing in like individual purchases at all these tiny little companies. It's just giant purchases. And that's not as effective as all the money we spend being circulated every single day into more a different form of consumerism.
yeah,
That's it's actually seeing the capitalist, the liberal envisionment in fruition of a fully functioning market, one that's
I mean,
self-preserving. Go ahead.
to go back, like on, I mean, now like thinking about like basic income, there's also another like solution. Obviously, like some people think that okay, people shouldn't just get a monthly money for doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
And there's a secondary option that I've thought about. I mean, we think about like if you know anything about history and FDR and such, the New Deal was a huge thing. It created because there was definitely a deficit in employment opportunities.
Exactly.
People talk about a Green New Deal, and when you think about that, if a UBI is too distasteful, there why then we could create employment opportunities through that. Through I mean, the truth is like you can go anywhere in this country. There's infrastructure that needs repairing. There's roads that need repairing. There's train tracks that need repairing. Like we can create more projects that invest in clean energy. And the fact of it is, if UBI is so distasteful, there's another option. It's creating a Green New Deal, and it's creating these. It's to the government, mind you, but I mean, we did it. We did it in a time of economic strife in history, and we are currently going to go towards a point where with automation, there's going to be another point of economic strife.
Yeah.
And the truth of it is, we have to address it, right? But at the same time, we can create employment opportunities for people which will help them gain skills, will give them a pay, but will also help our infrastructure. There's no losses in that, in my opinion, because we haven't invested enough in infrastructure as a country. We should invest more. And so, if people are losing their jobs in the private sector due to automation, they'll have opportunities in the public sector to invest their skills and their expertise and their energy and their time into improving the public infrastructure, right? And
Yeah.
the only thing that's
There's
so
there's
boring,
there's
sorry,
parts that I agree with that. Like, I do think that green energy is inherently part of the future, in the fact that we aren't already capitalizing on innovation prior to all the other countries in the world. Like, if we wanted to truly lead the world in something, why not lead it in fuel or different kinds of alternative fuels and energies and stuff like that, nuclear energy, stuff that the rest of the world rely on us for. But it's also like, do we want everybody employed in like construction? You know what I mean? Like, what is that? What's going to fill the gap between a scarcity free world and innovation? Is everybody's just going to work in construction for the governments? Like, so
I
there's
mean,
aspects that I think are necessary in the Green New Deal, but I also think it's
yeah,
always so abstract in people's minds that there's not really like a concrete plan and how that works.
yeah,
But I do think we do need at some point need to look ourselves in the mirror and realize that this oil scarcity is gonna run out at some point, and we
yeah,
can't just like wait till that to happen and not have a backup
yeah.
option.
And to respond to the Green New Deal, I think their construction jobs will be a lot of the jobs, but also historically, the New Deal also created a bunch of amazing arts programs for people. It hired artists to do murals in cities and towns. It hired musicians for different things. They hired even historians to do like recordings of like it interviewed slaves, like former slaves in the American South, like the United States of South, like that felt like they had people who were paid by the government to go and write or record interviews with them. So I think in my ideal world, to go back to the
Yeah,
original subject, in the ideal world, in the current state of things, seeing a Green New Deal occur, not just in the construction side, I think construction would be a huge part though, but also revitalizing American art through culture,
yeah. I
helping
think we could take
people.
cities like Detroit, like old historical cities that have been suffering and like really really suffered as a result of sort of globalist expansion, where like we lost a lot of auto industry deals to other countries, so
Yeah,
Detroit sort of fell apart and their infrastructure is falling apart. I think like investing a lot of money in new cities is going to create a lot more expansion, like
yeah,
economically. A lot more people are going to want to move businesses to these cities, and more countries are going to want to invest, or there's going to be a lot more trade as a result and economic expansion. And I think that's the kind of stuff that we can spend our money on instead of just, I don't know, other priorities that don't really benefit us.
yeah. And I think too, like you said, like if we had a modern day, like again, everyone refers to it as Green New Deal, whether you want to call it a Green New Deal, a New Deal Part Two, or anything. I mean, that's something that because a lot of people say once the government has its hand in the economy, it immediately goes to shit. I don't particularly
The
agree with that.
government has always had its hand in the U.S.
Yeah,
economy.
I mean, it has
That's always
regulations in the
existed.
economy. It literally has regulations in the economy that businesses follow, and So that's bullshit. But I think also the thing is the government can be a helping hand and turn cities that have been left and downtrodden into new frontiers for
Yeah.
industries. And like you said, like if we had a new deal today, like a new deal 2.0, and invested in places like what you may call it, like Detroit, and given them investments into art programs,
Yeah.
into infrastructure programs, like we could create the cities of tomorrow. I mean, the truth of it is, it's the sky's the limit. We, as a people of this country, have the ability, and have in the past had the ability to create big change with the help of government. And whether you call that socialism, whether you call that American patriotism, whatever the hell you want to call it, I don't care. Conservatives will probably call it the prior, but I think that that's socialism, and socialism is fucking good. Investing in people is the best investment you can make in life. You
And
know,
creating more housing opportunities all across the country as a form of investment is going to make this immigration crisis a lot less of an issue because people are going to have places to live and we can grow our population. Why is China and India automatically one of the most powerful economies in the world, even if they don't have the highest GDP per capita? It's because they have a ginormous population. So
They
why are we
do.
so concerned about people immigrating to the country when a larger United States, a larger country of liberal, American freedom loving values, is probably a better thing to influence the rest of the world and the other countries. And we can stay a global power by our population, not just military spending.
I
yeah, I
agree,
mean,
guys. This
people
is a great discussion, but we're past our hour, and this
yes,
is we have to table it here, guys. But I definitely want to pick up on that next week in terms of what we can do to combat China and India because they do have a massive population, and if we
Yeah.
could fix the immigration program, might put us in a better position to compete. So
Hmm.
it'd be a great topic for next week's episode. But I'm gonna let you guys say your final goodbyes to the audience this week, and I just want to thank you guys for tuning in, and I love Rowan and his insights. So I always
Hmm.
think that it's great to kind of um, dialogue and these different, big ideas of how to change the country because these are not just, these are taking our country in a different direction, not just
Yeah.
trying, how they say, manicure the lawn, but we're actually cutting the grass down and starting over. So I definitely
Build
think
back
that
better.
build back better. And I definitely think that's why I love the discussion. So, Seth, any final words?
We're now on Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're all on Twitter. The three of us will probably post the links in the description of this video. Make sure you follow and subscribe because we're trying to grow. We're trying to reach more audiences so we can find more guests, more interesting conversations. With the more diverse perspectives that we can have on, better ideas rise to the top. So let's expand this movement here. Have more conversations, more ideas.
Yeah.
Rowan, thanks for coming on. Do you have anything
I
to say?
appreciate it.
Ron, you
Um,
got a Twitter or anything like that you want to
I
share with
do have
everybody?
Twitter. It's oh god, well I'll say it, but you'll probably have to put it in the comment section. It's
Yeah.
Bodhisattva. So it's like if you know the word Bodhisattva, which is a Buddhist term, it's with if you switch the BO with an ROW, that's what it is. It'll probably be in the caption of this video.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you guys for having me on, and to tell people who are watching this, vote progressive. Whether I mean that's usually Democrat, so I'll say
Yeah.
you should vote Democrat.
Don't know a lot of
Um,
progressive Republicans today.
yeah, very
Bring back the
very
Teddy
low.
Roosevelt Republicans.
Yeah, exactly. But vote Democrat, in my opinion, or vote progressive independence, and get involved with your local politics. Like get involved
Yeah.
with your local county parties, get involved with your state parties. They really need you. And we have people, I even know people now who are coming to Wisconsin. I'm in Wisconsin. I've worked with the Wisconsin Democrats. I'm also been vice president of my school's college Democrats, Lawrence University student Democrats. You know, you can truly, if you have beliefs, no matter if you agree with everyone on every policy, you can still create concrete change like we have in Wisconsin. Sorry, I'll take a few seconds. We have gotten a Democratic governor another term. We've gotten a liberal majority in the state Supreme Court of Wisconsin now that has redone the gerrymander maps that have crushed the state from within. for many years now. So I mean, the thing is, people sometimes feel like, oh, I can't make much political change. I'm just sitting here at my home and I'm on Twitter or I'm on my phone and it's all this shitty news. But the truth is, if you do the work, however you're comfortable doing it, whether it be knocking doors, calling people, texting people, working like via your county party, your state party, doing that work actually does make a change. And I've been lucky enough to actually see it firsthand. And while things may seem like shit, it's good to have hope. And yeah, just
it's always better to have hope. You know what I mean?
and
Just
live
sort
with
of
love and peace.
live with love.
Yes,
Peace and
sir.
love.
Peace and love. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. See you next week.
See you around.
Everybody have a great week.